The Draconians arrived into the air shaft without incident. One of the civics, who'd been first down, had been sent out to scout. He came back to report.
"No sign of anyone up ahead, sir," he said. "Although the place reeks of dwarf. They were here, not long ago."
"The route to the treasure starts in a large chamber," said Kang. "It can't be too far. I have a hunch the scent of dwarf will lead us right to it. Slith, you go on point." The Draconians moved rapidly. The smell of dwarf led them on, growing stronger and fresher. They walked for what Kang estimated was about an hour, and then he saw Slith, who'd been out in front, motioning. He had found a small chamber that opened into a huge chamber, and it appeared that their dwarven guides had stopped there and cooked dinner. Kang entered the massive chamber. He guessed that long ago the miners must have used the chamber to unload and reload ore cars. 20 rusted cars in various states of disrepair stood along the far wall of the chamber. Wheels, axles, and hinges littered the floor. Either the dwarves hadn't bothered to clean up this worksite, or they'd fled it in a hurry. "Put out sentries," he ordered Slith. "We'll rest here." "Sir, do you want torches lit?" "Might as well. At least we can have a look around. This may be the starting point on the map," Kang said. The Draconians lit torches. Soon the entire chamber was illuminated. Kang saw, with growing excitement, that the chamber was shaped like a kidney bean, and that massive blocks formed the wall opposite him, a wall that sealed off one side. He drew out the map, studied it in the light. The first chamber, the starting point on the map, was shaped like a kidney bean. The blocked-up wall was indicated as well. "Bless their little hearts," said Kang in satisfaction, looking down at what remained of the dwarves' cooking fire. "They led us right to the spot." Elation swelled up inside him. The Draconians rested and ate. Kang and Slith studied the map. When the last sentry had finished eating, Kang issued orders. "We'll move on until we're too tired to go any farther." He paused, then added, "Keep your eyes and ears open." A little while later, Gloth came forward.
"Sir, I hear something."
"So do I. Probably it's the dwarves," Kang said. "They could be anywhere down here, bumbling around in the dark. These tunnels distort the sound, carry it for miles." The Draconians drew their weapons. Another hour of walking brought them to a three-way fork. Kang stopped and investigated the map, which indicated the center branch. They moved down the center fork. 2 more forks took them to the right. Slith's light blared out, illuminated a small chamber off to the right. Kang motioned for a halt. "Let's get some sleep," he said. Slith agreed. "Is it all right with you, sir, if I send out 3 scouts? Any forks ahead?" Kang consulted the map. "They'll come to a fork about 1.5 miles down. Cross a bridge over a large chasm, and the fork is on the other side. Tell them to stop there, listen, then come back, and send Gloth with them. They might need his magic." Moments later, the scouts disappeared down the tunnel. The rest of the Draconians set up camp inside the chamber, placing sentries at the entrance. Selquist's plan had worked better than even he had anticipated. The dwarves had waited, hidden in a small shaft branching off from the first main chamber room. They watched the Draconians scout the chamber, heard Kang ascertain that this was indeed the starting point on the map. The dwarves had then proceeded to follow the Draconians through the maze of tunnels. The sound in the tunnels was sometimes difficult to follow, and the dwarves had actually wound up slightly ahead of the Draconians, but Selquist didn't care. As long as they managed to stay in the Draconians' general vicinity, he knew they would eventually wind up in the right place. Feeling quite friendly toward the Draconians, Selquist was a bit saddened to think of Morthane and his band of cutthroats destroying the dragon eggs. Such very profitable eggs, too. The Draconians would be certain to pay big. "To arms!" somebody shouted up ahead. "To arms!" Selquist raised his head. 3 Draconians raced frantically back down the tunnel, straight past them, and back toward the bridge. Selquist stopped, open-mouthed, and stared, as did the other dwarves in the tunnel. He understood why the Draconians were running. Augur, grabbing hold of Selquist, began babbling. "What is that? Rourke, save us! What is that thing?" "A grell!" Selquist cried, his voice cracking. "It's a grell!" The grell was a greenish blob. A gigantic brain floated off the ground about 6 feet above the heads of the dwarves. It had green tentacles, a beak like a bird's, and a nasty disposition. The grell did not appear inclined to chat or pass the time of day. It swooped down on them, lashing out viciously with its spiny tentacles, gnashing its beak, obviously intent on killing every one of them. Selquist turned the knife. Morthane and his soldiers, however, began attacking the grell. They stabbed at the tentacles and thrust their lit torches into its eyes. Selquist stopped running and turned to watch the fight. The dwarves weren't making much headway. 3 were already down, rolling and writhing in agony from the poison of the grell's paralyzing sting. Selquist was just thinking how smart he'd been, bringing along Morthane to serve as grell fodder, when Augur, axe in hand, charged straight past Selquist, running headlong to the grell. Entering the fray, Augur slashed at one of the grell's tentacles. His sword connected and cut off about a foot of the wriggling arm. Green ooze spurted, splashing over Augur's head, hitting him in the eyes. Augur shrieked, his body convulsed. He pitched forward onto his face and lay unmoving on the ground. The grell hovered above its victim, beak gnashing. Morthane was attacking him from behind, whacking at the back tentacles, and the grell was whacking absent-mindedly at Morthane. Emitting a series of clicking sounds from its beak, the grell lifted the tentacle. An object it held clutched in the tentacle began to glow with an eerie blue light. Selquist groaned. The grell had somehow managed to come into possession of what appeared to be a magical wand. It was a rod about a foot long, black as night, and wound round with the bodies of dragons of various colors. The heads of the 5 dragons formed the top of the wand. The grell whipped about, pointed the wand at Morthane, and made a loud clicking sound with its beak. Blue-white light flared from the mouths of the 5 dragons. A flash, a bang. Morthane made a kind of soggy popping sound, and what was left of him splattered over the walls, the floor, and his fellow dwarves. Then the grell turned back to Augur, who still couldn't see and couldn't move. The other dwarves had fallen back in panic, the shocking death of Morthane having effectively taken the fight out of them. The grell raised the wand, pointed it at Augur. The monster started clicking. Selquist thrust his hand in his belt, drew his knife, and threw it over the heads of the dwarves bunched in front of him. The knife embedded itself in the frontal lobe of the brain-like mass. Green ichor began dribbling down from the wound. The grell faltered in its spellcasting. Its tentacles twitched. Taking advantage of the grell's weakness, Selquist beat and pummeled his way through the crowd. He slipped in beneath the flailing tentacles, grabbed hold of Augur's shoulder, and began dragging his helpless friend back away from the grell. Selquist's feet slipped in the remains of Morthane, slid out from underneath him. It figures, Selquist thought angrily. Even dead, Morthane's out to get me. He lay flat on his back, staring up at the grell. Raising the wand, the grell held it above Selquist. The wand began to glow. The grell began to click. Selquist knew he was a dead dwarf. Suddenly, from somewhere behind him, a wave of small crossbow bolts, outlined in red flame, flew over Selquist and thudded into the grell's brain. The grell screamed and writhed. Its tentacles jerked wildly. Another wave of red-hot bolts streaked over the dwarves, followed by yet another. The grell seemed to implode. Its brain looked like a sponge wringing out blood and pus. Sinking to the floor of the cavern, it ceased to move. Dazed, Selquist picked himself up and looked over his shoulder. A huge Bozic Draconian, carrying a small, handheld crossbow, pounded down the hallway, hopping over the crouched dwarves as he came. The Bozic was followed by about 20 more Draconians, swords and crossbows in their hands. The Bozic jumped over Selquist. Reaching the body of the grell, the Bozic swooped down, took hold of the magical wand, and gingerly slid it out of the dead grell's grasp. His prize safe, the Bozic turned, grinned, and snapped his teeth at the dwarves. "Thanks for the nice wand," he said. "And it was really good of you to take on that grell for us. Such a pleasure doing business with you. Keep in touch." The Bozic bowed to Selquist, then waved his hands and shouted orders. The rest of the Draconians surged around the dwarves, leapt over the dwarves, ran past the dwarves, and vanished into the darkness. "Well," said Selquist as he picked himself up, "I'm the new leader, it seems." He wiped Morthane off his hands and bent down to help rouse poor Augur. The Draconians continued on through the tunnel at a run. Kang gripped the wand tightly, examined it while he ran. There was no doubt at all. This was the wand Huzzard had described to him. It was getting warmer, which seemed odd. Underground caverns always maintain the same temperature, winter and summer, but the heat was definitely rising rapidly. Kang rounded a bend to find that Slith and his 2 scouts had halted, staring into a chamber that opened up in the center of the tunnel. A bright, reddish glow spread over them. Its source was the chamber. On the wall beside the chamber, a 5-headed dragon, the image of Tehesis, Queen of Darkness, was carved in stone. Kang ran his dry tongue over his teeth. This is the favor, he muttered to himself. She wants me to face whatever is in there. Kang fumbled in his leather harness, removed the medallion that was the symbol of his rank. He quietly handed the medallion to Slith. You're in command now, my friend, Kang said. Reaching out, he attached the medallion to Slith's harness. Take the map as well. He handed it over. You and the others continue on to find the dragon eggs. I'll keep the wand and deal with this little matter. That's an order. His troop protested this order vehemently, especially Slith, but Kang insisted. Soon he was alone. He faced the red glowing chamber. Before he entered, he placed his hand on the symbol of the five-headed dragon drawn on the wall and asked for his queen's blessing. Holding the wand in one hand, his sword in the other, he ran through his catalog of magical spells and began to walk steadily toward the pit. The dwarves were shaken by their encounter with the grell. When they stopped to rest, Selquist was glad to discover that Velmer was still among them. It would never do to return to Celebunden without the brewmaster. Selquist studied the map. When he reported that the treasure chamber was just up ahead, they found the courage to travel on. I feel sort of crawly inside, like someone's watching us, said Velmer in a low voice. All I can feel is the heat, complained Autumn, wiping sweat from his face. It's not supposed to be hot on the ground, is it? The tunnel in which they were traveling opened into an enormous chamber. The dwarves gathered around the opening, stared inside. Red light radiated from the pit in the center of the room. The heat was intense, forced the dwarves to shield their faces against it. Selquist, this isn't the treasure room. It's the wrong shape. This room isn't even on the map, Mortar pointed out. We must have come the wrong way. Bah, Selquist spoke with considerably more spirit than he actually felt. His stomach was crawling around like it was looking for a way out of his body. We've come across a lava pit, that's all. The floor probably caved in sometime after the treasure was hidden here, which is why this isn't on the map. Selquist edged toward the chamber entrance and looked inside, eyes squinted against the fiery light. I can see an exit, way over there, he pointed. So we go in, circle around the lava pit, and go out. That's all there is to it. I don't know, Selquist. Something in there doesn't want us in there, Pessel said in a shaky voice. The dwarves stood, glancing at each other and back into the chamber uncertainly. I'll go in, said Selquist finally, and started for the chamber entrance. And stuff your pockets full of treasure while we're not looking, Velmer snorted. We'll all go, or none of us go. The dwarves shuffled after him. Slith led the Draconians silently down the main tunnel until they reached the siding. Do you smell that? Dwarf, he whispered, glancing back at his troops. Douse that light. They're up ahead of us in the siding. I can hear them breathing. His words, his very thoughts, were lost in the gloom that shook the cavern. The Draconians braced themselves against walls that shivered beneath their hands. The boom subsided, only to be followed by an ominous roar which started low, and grew in volume until it seemed to suck the air from the chamber, the courage from the Draconians. Ahead of them, they heard the sound of hoarse voices crying out in terror. The red light grew. With the light came a wave of heat, and a foul and stifling odor, worse than the heat, more painful than the flaring light. Awful fear seized the Draconians, and shook them as a wolf shakes a torn carcass. Dragon! A Draconian behind him croaked. Up ahead, the dwarves were cursing and shouting. Then Slith heard another voice, this one shouting loudly and defiantly, in Draconian. The commander, Glock cried. It's got the commander! Drawing their swords, the Draconians ran down the corridor, heading straight into the inferno. Kang could not move. Terror paralyzed him. He stared at the pit. It was enormous, filled with fire and molten rock, magma that bubbled and churned. The head of a dragon emerged, but not like any dragon Kang had ever before seen on Krynn. It was a dragon of fire. Its scales were black, the red of its fiery body glowing hideously beneath. Its mane was fire that crackled in the air. Opening its mouth, it belched forth noxious gases. He recalled Huzzard's words. All I see is fire, the heroes withering, dying in the flames. Krynn withering and dying in the flames. This was the creature of chaos. This was what would kill the heroes and bring about Krynn's doom. The dragon's front-clawed feet dug into the rock at the rim of the pit. It was pulling itself up out of the lava pit. Its eyes were dark, empty as a universe drained of all life. The eyes focused on Kang.